tradition and not a craze. A plane carrying the Libyan Deputy Defence Minister has landed in Cairo. It was one of 3 planes belonging to Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi, which earlier took off from Tripoli. It's not clear where the other 2 planes have gone, nor what the purpose of the visit to Cairo is. But there is speculation the Libyan minister may be there to meet Egyptian or Arab League officials. Meanwhile, the battle goes on inside Libya, with Gaddafi's forces using tanks, rockets and airstrikes against the rebels. In the last few hours, an airstrike has hit a fuel storage facility in the port of Sidra, which is near Ras Lanuf. There's an intense battle also going on in AlJazeera, the rebel base closest to Tripoli. The town is completely cut off, and we're being told that it is surrounded by Gaddafi's tanks. Over in Ben Jawad, rebel forces are now in the town centre, pushing Gaddafi forces to the west of the city. Earlier, the Libyan government said it had taken back this coastal town after heavy shelling there. Well, Lawrence Lee has the latest on the fighting.
These extraordinary pictures from the rebel front line outside Ras Lanuf give a graphic illustration of the challenges facing the uprising. Small groups of men mill around, encouraging each other. After a quiet few hours, the air raids have begun again. Suddenly, there's a target to aim at. A few more seconds pass, and then a Libyan warplane can clearly be seen. This is why it's so hard for the rebels. They have so little time to aim their guns. Given all that, it remains striking how defiant they are.
Where is Gaddafi? We want him here where we're fighting. Gaddafi is sitting in his control room.
This is game over, Gaddafi.
We really want you to just leave Libya and save us from all this bloodshed. Let the young generation rebuild Libya from scratch.
It says nothing for Gaddafi that he's unable to take more advantage of these weaknesses. His latest offer to talk to the media in Tripoli turned into a farcical speech behind a curtain in the middle of the night, in which he once again suggested there was no domestic opposition.
It's a small group from Afghanistan, Algeria, Egypt and Palestine who entered cities. They recruited youngsters, juveniles under the age of 20, upon whom the law cannot even apply. How did they recruit them? They told them to chant, "Say Allahu Akbar."
The apparent target for the warplanes, assuming they fired accurately, was a fuel storage facility which is now erupting in flames. Ras Lanuf is home to one of Libya's biggest oil terminals, and so the repercussions of this could be global. After the bombing run, the fighters move in convoy towards Ras Lanuf to take their fight to the ground. Just as inevitably, a few minutes later, the ambulances start coming back. The weaknesses of both sides in all this mean the chaos looks open-ended. This is how failed states happen. Lawrence Lee, Al Jazeera.
Well, as we've been hearing, a fuel storage facility in Ras Lanuf is on fire. Ras Lanuf, of course, a strategic coastal town with a major oil refinery and the infrastructure needed to get the oil to market. I should tell you that both the Libyan government and the rebels there are blaming each other for setting the oil storage facility on fire. Let's speak to Jackie Rowland, who's on the phone for us. Jackie, just tell us where you are now and what you've been seeing.
Well, Shuli, I've moved back from the front line now because we were really on the front line, and I'd say that we were closer to the action than was comfortable. What we were able to establish was that it would appear that some Gaddafi troops maybe had got cut off from the rest of the Gaddafi forces. We saw at least 2 Gaddafi mortar launchers inside that oil storage facility. They were actually on the other side of the fence. They were in front of the main oil storage depot. They were firing mortar rounds out. The rebels were along the main road near to us. We had ducked down into a foxhole to observe the burning of the oil facility. And in fact, I think I was talking to you at that very moment, Shuli, when another Gaddafi warplane flew in and dropped its bomb approximately 300 meters from us. What happened then, unbeknownst to us, was that the rebel fighters moved some rocket launchers behind a bank behind us. And so our foxhole was actually in front of the rocket launchers, and the mortars, the Gaddafi forces were firing mortars at those rocket launchers, and as we lay in the foxhole, about half a dozen mortars exploded around us. When there was a break in the fire for a moment, presumably to allow the Gaddafi forces to reload their mortars, we just broke for cover. We ran, we tore across the desert, and we stood on the roadside and were able to flag down one of the cars containing rebel forces who were retreating. They were retreating at huge speed. It was difficult to find a car that had space to leap into, but one pulled up and we just piled in and just really moved as far away from the front line at as great a speed as possible.
Well, I'm not surprised, Jackie. It sounds like you were in the thick of it, and we're glad that you got out safely. There are conflicting reports about who set the oil facilities on fire. Rebels blaming Gaddafi warplanes and Gaddafi forces blaming the rebels. Is it clear to get an idea of exactly what goes on when it must be so confusing and noisy?
Well, it would appear that the fire in the oil facility was as a result of bombs dropped by the Gaddafi planes. But where the confusion arises is that there were Gaddafi forces very, very close to that installation. So maybe that's why we think that maybe those forces have got cut off from the rest of the Gaddafi units deployed in that area. Because you had a situation where Gaddafi warplanes were bombing an oil facility, and meanwhile there were Gaddafi forces with mortar launchers literally about 100 meters or so from that facility. We could see them behind the perimeter fence of the facility, which leads us to suspect that they've got cut off from the rest of the force, because otherwise it would seem completely illogical that the Air Force, the pro-Gaddafi Air Force, would be dropping bombs in an area where the Gaddafi ground forces were in fact operating against rebels on the front line.
And what's happening with the fighting there? I mean, how organised are the rebel fighters, and what kind of equipment do they have?
Well, I have to say that we were actually quite surprised at, in fact, how organised they actually were on the front line. Up until now, we've seen these chaotic checkpoints with people carrying a strange mixture of equipment, wearing a strange mixture of military fatigues and jeans and bomber jackets. However, on the front line itself, they did actually appear to be operating with some discipline and also with some military know-how. From our foxhole, we were observing multiple rocket launchers firing in the direction of the Gaddafi mortars. And the very fact that this rocket launcher, this mobile rocket launcher, moved into the bank of sand behind where we were hiding, they had chosen a very good strategic position, a well-defended position behind which to try to attack the Gaddafi mortars. So it would appear that the forces actually operating the heavy equipment close to the front line maybe do have more experience and more tactical know-how than we had previously given them credit for.
The live picture we're looking at the moment, Jackie,